Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we've seen Avatar, The Way of Water. Finally it's arrived, 12, 13 years after the original Avatar came out. Its sequel is here. It's been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and it was going to be a 3-film series. It became a 5-film series. They kept on saying the technology's got to improve and develop and all this. James Cameron, the director and guy behind it all, is incredibly devoted to the technological developments that his films require and so on. It's named The Way of Water for the giant queue of people needing a piss afterwards, because it is 3 hours and 12 minutes long. But we both remarked, even though we were in that queue, we both remarked that it did not feel 3 hours and 12 minutes long.
No, I didn't look at my watch once.
It really
which
moves.
Is usually my the sign that I'm finding it dull, or this kept me going. I didn't look at my watch once. I was involved with it at all times. It was much, much better than I thought or expected, actually, because we were just talking earlier about our first experience of watching the original Avatar, and
Way back when,
and it was amazing to see it, in a huge screen with the 3D. It was at Millennium Point, which was then the official IMAX cinema, the largest cinema in Birmingham.
As in a full IMAX top to bottom, although it wasn't a full IMAX film, but it was an enormous screen.
Yeah. And it was an amazing experience. And often afterwards, when you talk to people, you were talking about different things because they'd seen it on TV. And of course, the onus there was on how bad the dialogue was and so on and so on, which was true, right? And actually today, kind of, Mike made a joke that had me laughing for about half an hour, which was like, as the credits came on, Mike said, "Look at that! It took 3 people to write that." Because the dialogue is so bad, right? But there is something to be said about the experience, and it's an experience that you just absolutely cannot recapture when it goes on Netflix or wherever, video on demand it'll go. So I had a really good time watching it, but I also thought it's kind of dumb.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So we saw this today on what is now the kind of main IMAX in Birmingham, the Cineworld digital IMAX. So the widescreen IMAX, but it's the screen we see. I think probably most of our films on. When the film is showing in that screen, we tend to try and see it there. It's great. And this, you had to see it there. It has been made in high frame rate, 48 frames a second, but that's not showing here, and it wasn't showing at the NEC either, where they have one, because that's where we saw Gemini Man in high frame, which was like the only reason to see Gemini Man. So we had to make the trip. I did look, and I think there's some cinema in Peterborough that's showing it in that format. Right. I'm not going to make that trip. I imagine that the water stuff would have looked astonishing in that. It looked astonishing in 24 frames a second.
Astonishing now.
I would be interested to see how the rest of the film kind of works in that. But what we saw today, I thought it was just absolutely beautiful, stunning. Someone, I just saw it in the Wikipedia article in the reception section. I think someone's review said something like, "It's an hour of film stuffed into a 3-hour bag." Yeah. I can kind of see that. Like, there's an hour of story, really. It's not that interesting, and it's not at all original. And you see every single beat and moment coming, but everything that's not trying to tell that fairly dull story is what I loved. It's all that playing with the fish in the water, exploring a new world, and just having the experience of seeing these visuals. Look at this fish we've made. Look at the lighting. Look what we've done. Look how great the water looks. And you just spend so long doing all that stuff, and I loved every minute of that.
I did too, and I disagree with that it's a 1-hour story stuffed into 3 hours, because you have to think about what is story on film, right? It's not just plot. The story is not reducible to the plot, right? So it has quite a thin plot, but I think the story is richer than that, and part of the reason why the film doesn't feel boring is because all of those shots of the water and the bonding with the animals and so on are important, right? And they're pleasurable, and they're beautiful to look at, and they're entertaining, right? So there's a reason why the film is not boring.
Well, they're connected to the characters. So the idea of this film is it's set 10 or so years, maybe a bit more, after the end of the first Avatar, in which Jake Sully, a human, was given a Na'vi body, which is this alien race, moon called Pandora that the army is trying to take over. They're trying to mine it. It's all all this colonialism stuff going on in there. And he goes native, and he decides to fight for the Na'vi and help to protect their world. And they defeat the enemy. And now a decade and a half, something like that. After that, he's got a family. He's the leader of this clan. He's Turuk Makto, I think was the thing, is that like, he tamed the big bird that no one could tame, and that made him the king, all that sort of stuff. But the guys he fought are coming back for him. There's vengeance involved. And so they leave in order to protect the rest of the people. They leave and they go to this other race of people there. They're fish people. Every film has fish people now. DC's had Aquaman for ages, and Marvel just introduced the Mexican fish people. Yeah. And now we've got fish people in Avatar. And they search for refuge there, just the family of, 5 or 6 of them. And of course, the fight ends up being brought to the fish people because they track him down, they're still after him. And all of that exploration of, once we get there, learning about these people, learning about the world in which they inhabit, and learning to get on with all the various fish that they've got, is just glorious. And as you say, it's not just that it's wonderful to look at all this stuff, although it is, but it's because the kids, it's all about the kids really, their exploration of the world in which they're in is what we're connected to. Like, we share their joy and their wonder and their all that stuff. Yes. It's not just that it's nice to look at, it's that the characters feel it too, and that's what we're connected to.
I think in another, I think it was Peter Bradshaw who said that in spite of all the technology, there isn't a single kind of exciting image in the film. And actually, I don't agree with that at all. I thought that, there were entire sequences that I thought were marvelous to look at. I thought, I particularly the young daughter, who I think is played by Sigourney Weaver. Yeah, kind of all of her, connecting with the sea life and the turning on of the lights and creating a trail through all of that, and discovering her breathing wings, and I thought kind of there were there were beautiful images that were also actually kind of spectacular story points.
Yeah, and things. She plays that character because the character is also the daughter of the character Sigourney Weaver played in the first film. There are shots that are backlit by kind of sunsets and things, which are just absolutely magical. And it's funny. I was thinking, it's a while since I watched the first Avatar, and I didn't revisit it in any way before seeing this, and I kind of wish I had, because I was thinking some of this doesn't look all that different from the first Avatar, but that speaks more, I think, to how extraordinary Avatar was visually than to a kind of lack of progress, because there's certainly progress, certainly in terms of kind of materials, like obviously the water. A lot of time has been spent on making the water look as good and realistic as it is, and having light refract through it the way it does. Lighting has been a huge change in kind of graphics in cinema over the last decade or so. We've seen it in things like the Marvel films, and Toy Story 3 and 4 had incredible lighting compared to what had come before. So those things are huge improvements, and there wasn't a single thing visually that I kind of didn't believe. Obviously these guys, the Na'vi look like cats, and the fish people are fishy, and you never believe that they're real. But you don't, once you buy that they're characters in this world, you don't see flaws in them. Everything is something I believe, and I think what I really sort of thought was the same visually in terms of its quality as the original Avatar was the animation. A lot of work had been put into facial animation, facial motion capture, and getting all of these details of how someone looked. I remember in the first film, it was about Sigourney Weaver's smile. She's got this really identifiable smile, and you saw it in her CGI Na'vi version. You go, wow, that's amazing that they've managed to communicate that. And here it's Stephen Lang, who was the villain in the first one. He returns as a villain in this, now as an avatar himself. And again, it's the look of his mouth again. Actually, it's his smile and the way his teeth look. It's remarkable. It's really remarkable, and it really sells the believability, the reality of what you're seeing.
I mean, I thought it's an interesting thing how this is different than animation, and it makes a difference because I think the mobile faces, kind of, they do convey, I don't know, a different degree of humanity. It's kind of more believable than the actors can bring something to it, and they do. So I thought, I mean, I've mixed feelings because I was looking at these bodies, and to me, there's something slightly disturbing about the shape, right?
Like the design of the very tall, slender.
Yeah, I mean they're very attractive, but also they all look like adolescent boys. You know, I mean, it's that look that kind of young boys have.
Like sort of like they've grown up too quickly. They're all lanky.
That's right. So they're too skinny, right? Like, and they've just shot up. And in another 3 or 4 years, they'll gain that weight back and look normal. But
Yeah.
So I thought
they're supposed to be kind of lithe and cat-like, aren't they? Because they live in the trees.
I know. Yeah, but they're highly detailed, and I'm not sure if it's sexualized particularly, but just that is the ideal. Yeah, there's something kind of to think about there.
How do you mean ideal? You think it's the film's ideal of what a person should look like?
Yes. I mean, to create a world where all these, warriors, like they have that torso and those long limbs and those arms, yeah? I thought, it was worth kind of thinking about, really.
You think differently about the fish people? Or pretty much the same? I mean, they're not that different.
No, they're not that different. So, I mean, the thing about the fish people that I noticed is they all have kind of like indigenous tribal tattoos of some kind, right?
Yes.
So, there is like this mix of mysticism in the film, tribal stuff, water worship, Buddhism.
There's a Maori thing going on there, especially later on when they're all sticking their tongues out, which like the hacker and like the Maori intimidation sort of thing. But it felt very dumb is the word you use, and that's the word I would use. Like it's not. It's kind of it's a dumb person's idea of giving a group of people a kind of a characteristic of tribalism or something like that. Like it's really not that smart. You've just copied something that you've seen a certain tribe of people, a certain group of people have in real life.
I'm wondering if this deserves a little bit further exploration because the argument that I always make about musicals is if you're looking for the depth in musicals in characterization and story, you're a fool, right? Because whatever musicals have to tell us about life and what it is to be human, so on, actually comes from the dancing, and the singing and the camera movement and the set design and the color and and I think maybe this is that kind of film, so certainly at a surface level from what I can see now, it really lacks intellectual depth. Something to be considered maybe is if there isn't something else in that technology, the spectacle, the imagery, right, kind of all of those things, but I'm old and I can't keep 3 hours in my head.
I think it may be to do with like maybe the real value is in that sense of wonder. If it can communicate it to you, then that's what's really valuable about it.
And I think it does. And some of the things that seem like a little corny, I really liked. So like the conversation with the fish. Yeah, we're both outcasts. I mean, I found it kind of on some level basic, but also touching. It worked on me emotionally.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did laugh because he's chatting away to this fish, and he's chatting away, and we've had no indication yet that he can understand the fish. So he's talking to it like the way you might talk to your cat or something, but you're never going to understand the answer that your cat gives you. And so when the fish, it comes up with subtitles, he asks the fish why he's been outcast because someone has told him that this fish is an outcast from his group. And so when he asks, the fish says something like it's complicated, which is hilarious in itself, that a fish is giving such an interesting answer. But then the idea that like it's subtitled, so there's something to be understood here, and the characters can maybe understand it. And of course, you then get the idea that okay, all of these noises that the fish is making, these kind of submariner noises, these grunts and howls and stuff, are a language. So you go, okay, I guess fine, I get that. They're learning it, whatever. And then a little bit later, you get the research scientist who's having his research paid for by the fact that they're essentially whalers. And he describes how these are intelligent creatures, more intelligent even than humans. And again, this is something that you hear occasionally about, like pigs, elephants, dolphins, you hear how intelligent they are. Not that they're more intelligent than humans, but these are animals with great intelligence compared to other animals. And of course, whenever I hear that, I kind of think, but they've never written a play. But then in this,
they compose music.
Yeah, in this we've got they're great songwriters in this, and I just like that was too much for me. I still don't really buy that. Someone's one of the whales dies, and the woman who the queen of this tribe, this fish people, says she's crying over it and says that this fish was a great songwriter. I'm like, you're not selling that to me. You haven't done enough.
Like, I kind of bought it, but my first thought also was, well, if you're so smart, why haven't you created spaceships like the others, right? Like, so.
But what you're saying is, it's a bit of a distraction, because what you're saying about despite corniness, there's something really to enjoy and all of that stuff.
Yes.
It's absolutely true. I like it too. I like the fact that this kid is just developing this relationship with this fish. I kind of know roughly where it's going to be going, because then you get this fish's story, and then you go, okay, fish is going to be redeemed somehow, and he gets on with the kid because the kid is also feeling outcast as well, like all kids do, I guess. But there's that. So even though like every single movement along these kind of character arcs, I think is incredibly predictable, and every single movement of the story, I think, is incredibly predictable, that's kind of that's not standing in my way of enjoying things. And I think one of the things about the first Avatar, people really picked up on how unoriginal things were, and they said it was Fern Gully in space. They compared it to Dancing with Wolves and so on and so forth. Again, not really an original bone in its body plot-wise. But I kind of think like that's one of the reasons it became the highest grossing film of all time, because it didn't challenge anything. It didn't challenge you to understand its story. It made it incredibly easy to enjoy what was beautiful and splendid about it, which was its visuals and its aesthetic and its atmosphere and all of that.
Yes, though for me, what was really off-putting was really the dialogue. Every time they said, "Yo, bro," right? Like, it just kind of made me think of gay porn films. It's like, "Oh, you're so big, bro, bro." Like all this broing. Like, I thought, my God, like the dialogue is just atrocious.
It is very bad.
So and it was atrocious on the level that it got me out of the film. It really did make me think about.
You didn't notice how bad it was. I mean, the thing about plot points being predictable and you see the cogs and everything is they weren't bad enough to take you out of it. You saw what it was doing, but it never jumped you out of it. But you're right about the dialogue. That you notice that all the time in a very distracting way.
Yeah, it's so cliche-ish, like, "I see you, son." Yeah, and all this, these contemporary expressions. Yeah, this vernacular that is like kind of you hear everywhere. So yeah, it's every cliche in the book. "I see you." Yeah, bro, that's what fathers are for.
That's the one that really got to me about the thing about... Because I See You was from the original film, and it was this thing about that's actually what the Na'vi say when they bond, sort of thing.
Okay,
so right. I give it that one.
Oh, so maybe that's where the expression comes from the original.
I think maybe people actually did copy that a bit from the first Avatar. The thing about the Jake Sully character constantly talking about what a father does. A father protects, and that's what gives him meaning. I thought, not only is that really boring, but is that not kind of a little bit retrograde? It's not that unhealthy, really, like to want to protect your family as a father and to think that's a great thing. But there is something about... it kind of implies seeing other people as enemies to your family all the time somehow. There's something that I don't quite relish about that idea.
Well, the film is mixed up about that, right? Because, there's that whole thing with the white boy. What's it called?
A spider.
Spider, right? Where...
White as in human. He's a human that they have sort of adopted.
So, where he's initially in the family, then he's outside the family, then at the end of the film, the family's reconstructed with him replacing the lost son, right? So, so this idea of a family is not purely biological. Well, through most of the film, you get the feeling that it's biological. Well, at first it isn't biological, then it becomes biological, then at the end this other kid is reintegrated. And to me that just seems muddled, like,
well, the film has some conceptualization of like a magic bond between fathers and sons in particular.
Yes.
Because the thing about this spider character is he is the son of the Stephen Lang character who died at the end of the first film, which is the villain. And Stephen Lang's character returns as this cloned Navi avatar version in this, and they say very up front, like, he's not my son, we're not biologically related, I just have the memories of his father. And even his father wasn't really his father because he hated him so much, all that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, you have the son saving him at the end, saving this clone version, and it is muddled because he's been abducted by the clone Stephen Lang. And there is this thing about, is he connecting to his dad? Because initially he's like, absolutely not, no way, I hate you, and I won't talk to you, and I won't give you anything, I won't tell you where anyone is, all that sort of stuff. But you do then get a couple of scenes, or maybe it's just one scene, where it's where the Stephen Lang character is bonding with the dinosaur bird thing, which again is like, it's kind of recapitulating that scene where Jake Sully does it in the first film. And when he manages to tame this bird and then start flying around on it, having fun, the kid smiles and it's like, oh right, is he gaining some sympathy? But it doesn't follow that through to any convincing degree that he might have been like returned by his dad. And then eventually, when it gets to the end of the climactic fight and Stephen Lang has been drowned and suffocated by Jake Sully, Spider sees him, wants to swim away, but can't bring himself to, rescues him. But it hasn't been sold enough, because then he does that, but then even though he rescues him, he still leaves, returns to the Jake Sully family. I mean, what it's essentially doing is setting up that he will come back again for the third film, and he's never going to stop being the villain. But it's not thought through enough. It's not worked through enough. It doesn't make enough sense of the characters' relationships with one another and the thoughts they have towards each other and their motivations. It is, as you say, very muddled. And I don't understand. That's what it is. I don't feel that I understand well enough. I don't think it's convincing enough why he did this, that, or the other.
Well, I get why he does, narratively, because the thing about being this clone, there's a little scene at the beginning where they say that basically all the memories and feelings have been captured in this pen drive. So, what is a person? Well, And so, of course, that's why he gives up in the showdown,
in the Mexican standoff.
Yeah, he lets that son go, and that is why the son then goes to rescue this person who's ostensibly the father. So,
But it does seem like there's something in James Cameron's writing that's like, this is a magical bond and it doesn't quite need to be explained,
Yeah.
Like, it's just because they're father and son somehow. And that overrides things.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of dodgy. I mean, but let's focus on the great things. Because I think one of the things I most enjoyed about this film, aside from the way that it looks and the whole spectacle of the thing, which I really can't underline enough, I found amazing. I also love the action, which is another thing that Cameron, I think, is terrific at. And all of the scenes here with, the killing of the fish, of that whale type thing, the shootouts then, at the end, which occupy maybe the last quarter of the film.
They're big.
Yeah. I found all of it really quite exciting, and really well done.
I mean, I remember in the original Avatar, there was a thing about how the last hour of the film is going to be action, he promised. Oh God. But actually it turned out to kind of be alright because he knows how to move his way through an action scene, he knows how to develop it and keep it interesting. And I think one of the things you can tell in this and the original Avatar as well, as I recall, is that he's not just filming things in 3D. He's conceiving of action in 3D.
Yes.
He's conceiving of imagery in 3D.
Yes.
The relationship between foreground and background, or just the...
I love that in this film. Just even in scenes that were not action, like in dialogue scenes, it was actually quite beautiful to see how this filming in depth, which you're used to seeing in, normal cinema. You can, and it's often kind of maybe meaningful, or it tells the story in different ways when you're kind of filming in depth. But here the filming in depth actually was like using the 3D to create that depth, which is also a narrative depth. I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, when Avatar came out in 2009, I was doing my dissertation at uni, my third year. My dissertation was on 3D cinema because Avatar was a film that was really driving its revival at that time and getting cinemas to install 3D equipment, 3D projectors and so on, just so they could show this, and that was going to be the film that made it stick. And of course, it hasn't really stuck. This is a one-off. 3D did not really capture people. It never has for very long. But one of the things I did during that dissertation was I spoke to a guy called Phil McNally. He calls himself Phil Captain 3D McNally. And he's a 3D supervisor on various films in the States. He did like Monsters vs. Aliens and things. And he said something really interesting to me, which seemed so obvious as soon as he said it, which was that every filmmaker is making a film in 3D. Like every image, apart from maybe South Park, which is supposed to look like cardboard cutouts, every image you're making is conceived in 3D. You're trying to give an illusion of 3D depth. Sure. In a stereoscopic movie, you're just actually doing that. You're giving that illusion more kind of substance, and of course it's so true. So I'm sure this film would look wonderful in 2 dimensions. It would still communicate those ideas. It's just made more quote unquote real in this. Of course, one of the things about 3D that people hate is that when things come out of the screen, you try and put your hand through them and they disappear, and it kind of makes itself not real immediately. But films haven't done that in 10 or 15 years. And one of the things about Avatar was like in 2009 was the opening shot of that was kind of seen through fog, seeing into this planet and seeing things go, and it was about going into this world, like it's seeing the screen as a window instead of something like a porthole for things to come firing out at you, which was the gimmick thing that people still really associate that with 3D,
sure.
And it's just not very true anymore. There is the occasional shot that's along those lines. There are shots of like spears or bullets coming towards the camera or in the camera's direction vaguely, but nothing jumps out at you in that way that really ruins the kind of your belief, I guess, in the world, that kind of reminds you that it's or makes you think of it as a gimmick anymore. Anyway, I don't know. I'm still talking.
I'm thinking, that like poor Hitchcock, because one of the best uses that I saw of that type of 3D was in Dial M for Murder. Yeah. Where the whole kind of narrative resolution of the mystery is through the 3D. Yeah. I think it was the scissors or something. And
she reaches her hand towards the camera.
That's right.
But her hand, again, as I recall, because we saw it, didn't we? It doesn't come out of the screen. It comes towards the screen. It's the 3D is expressing, that her wish to stay alive, her desire and all that. But it's the scissors are still sat on the other side of the screen from us. It's still not poking.
But my point is, that here is like the genius of Hitchcock working in 3D, using the 3D for, this particular storytelling. And then, of course, I think by the time the film was made and came out, 3D was already finished and it was released flat.
Yeah.
I think.
I think it may have been seen a bit in 3D, but it really hasn't for the most part. And 3D at the time was, it was around for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, not very long.
52 to 55-ish.
Yeah. I think it was, so anyway, I really love the action here. It was exciting to watch. It was beautiful. You can see where all the arrows were coming. You understand what was at stake in each scene, what they were going after, the various hurdles to accomplishing what they needed and surviving. You knew where the children were tied up and they had to get to them. And so actually kind of the journey of getting to them, of trying to rescue them, was always clear, So, and I think action takes on a different shape, form, and has a different effect when you do that. Like, I always go about this, the geography of, but you need that. And most films forget that, it's not enough just to have like limbs going all over the way or bullets, or kind of these edits that kind of just do montages of things crashing, or exploding. I thought this was like really, really well done, really exciting to see.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately, I would say the way you have to see it is in the cinema, and probably in 3D as well. Although I can see it looking very good in 2D, but
you
still,
miss something.
You do miss something. You would. I think that's true.
I mean, kind of. I think my pet peeve at the moment is, people speaking in bad faith about the cinema, which, so often you'll have critics who get kind of screeners and actually they're reviewing films from their laptop on some screener that they've got somewhere. And really, if cinema is an experience at all, then actually you have to give yourself over to the experience. And it's a different experience in the cinema. So films that are conceived for the cinema, and you can't find a better example than this one, should be seen there. Because actually, if you just see it on a TV, you're seeing something else.
Yeah. But it is... I got into a minor argument with someone on Reddit recently. I forget what the thread was about, but Christopher Nolan came up. And Christopher Nolan is someone who's really driven celluloid, like keeping celluloid alive. And my brother was telling me that for Oppenheimer, he got Kodak, or whoever it is, IMAX, I guess, to make black and white IMAX film, which they'd never done before. And it's like, that's the amount of clout that he has, And he's been absolutely instrumental in keeping celluloid film alive, and keeping people actually making it. And he's, we have his disagreements about how good his films are. We have issues with them here, there, and everywhere. But you want to see them at the cinema, and he wants them to be seen at the cinema. And this person on Reddit said, they used the word pompous. It blew my mind how pompous it is to say that your film should be seen at the cinema, essentially. How pompous of Christopher Nolan, they were saying. And I thought, I can understand if people are lazy and just can't be bothered to see things at the cinema. I don't agree with it, but I can understand that. But to see that as pompous, that an artist would have an idea of, and it's not like saying you should go to this particular cinema in the middle of nowhere to see my film. Go to a cinema, and they're everywhere. Like, that's all Christopher Nolan is saying. Has said, or was saying, that people were talking about. And the idea that someone would see that as pompous is ridiculous. It's sort of like saying, imagine how pompous it is to say that your book should be read on paper rather than an audiobook, for instance. I can imagine an author saying that.
Sure.
I think my books are better read with your eyes than with your ears.
Yes.
And I can understand what they would be saying. And I don't think people would call that pompous.
I think that was called like an old-fashioned nostalgic determinist or something at one point as a result of this. But, we live in a world where there's lots of images. They circulate everywhere and in different ways. I watch most of my stuff through a television set like most people. Actually, probably most people now watch it through a laptop, But I do think cinema... I'm very sad, for example, that I cannot see Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio or Bardo or things that, things by these filmmakers who are so exciting and who normally work with a big screen and who defend the big screen. And all of a sudden, your only way of seeing these things are on a television set. And my own experience is a negative one. I remember seeing Jean Vigo's L'Atlante, and I've been, waiting to see it for like 20 years. I finally got a hold of a VHS copy, and I saw it, and I thought, what was all the excitement about, really? And then I saw it on a big screen, and you completely get what all the excitement is about. But then I felt robbed of my first experience of watching the film, because, you're never going to recapture that experience, and it is a different one. So, I think if audiences are not willing to see a film like Avatar in a cinema, then cinema really truly is dead. Yeah.
Yeah. Having said that, Avatar has made some $800 million so far.
Yeah.
It's been out for about a week, so it's going to be huge. And I was interested in that because, one of the things I was thinking before it came out was the world in which Avatar was released in 2009 is not the same world cinematically as today. Right? It's 13 years since, and at the time it was the biggest film of all time. It remains the highest grossing. Avengers Endgame overtook it for a bit, and then they re-released Avatar in China to bump up its numbers a bit. So I think adjusted for inflation, it's still gone with the wind. But, pure numbers, it's Avatar at about $3 billion. But since 2009... Since that came out and was going to be the big new franchise that was going to change things forever, and it was going to be 2014, 2015, it kept getting pushed back and pushed back. Since that, Marvel has changed cinema completely, blockbuster cinema completely, like the way we think of blockbuster films. Completely, films like this. Sure. It's become so much more about the world building, and the universe. And this is not a film that's set in a universe. This is still essentially one character and his story. It's one character and his family and everyone else around him, but it's Jake Sully's story, as the first one was. It's a continuation of that. This is not about a universe in which someone else is going to show up from over here, someone else is going to show up from here, and then we'll have a crossover eventually. That's not what this series is looking like it's going to be.
No.
So it was interesting to me, basically, to think of how this series, which was conceived in the pre-Marvel times, would go over in... now that Marvel has, been through its first big, phase and Endgame and all of that. It obviously seems to be going down extremely well. It's making a huge amount of money and will continue to, I'm sure. And from my perspective, it doesn't feel out of date. Like story-wise, aesthetically, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't feel out of date. And certainly aesthetically, it feels absolutely a cut above other things. I mean, you can tell the amount of work that's gone in. And this isn't meant to kind of piss on digital artists who do all that. They're under an enormous amount of pressure, financially and in terms of time and all that kind of stuff. Like, you hear the stories about what VFX artists, what they go through for Marvel in particular, but other companies as well, the pressure that they're under and the way they're treated and so on. It's awful. But you can kind of tell, I think, the level of investment in those people that has happened for this film.
You see it in the credits. Yeah. Because actually, I think after the film is over, you get the credits of the director, the writers, and then I think about 5 or 6 BFX people get their own credit. Yeah. Which is very unusual. And this before the actors and so on, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was telling, and they deserve the credit. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. And Merry Christmas.
Oh yeah, Merry Christmas.